things, right? The Raiders, the Rams, the Broncos, all places where he had to fail and he had to learn. But in New England, Patriots fans love him. In New England, he's always been great. He's always been a great play caller. Some guys are just not made to be great head coaches. Some guys are better off as offensive coordinators. And with Josh McDaniels as the OC, they've won many Super Bowls. They've been to many Super Bowls. They've been very competitive, even with lackluster quarterback play or rookie quarterbacks like Mac Jones, guys at the end of their career like Cam Newton, guys at the peak of the NFL like Tom Brady. And now he will be really responsible for growing Drake May's game, for making him a great quarterback. And we saw already Mac Jones, his best season was with Josh McDaniels. I think that is a great reason behind why they hired McDaniels, because he has that experience of the last time they picked a guy in the first round, Mac Jones played really well in that offense. Then Josh McDaniels left. He got some combination of Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. He really fell off after that, and he was never the same player, and he never had the same confidence. And what I love about McDaniels teaming up with Mike in New England is the marriage in terms of the toughness. You know, McDaniels, as much as he was always known for Brady and throwing the football, they have always been really good at running the ball. You know, McDaniels with Cam Newton, they were a top-end rushing offense with a mobile quarterback. He could bring some of that with Drake May. They were always a great passing offense with Brady, of course. And with Mac Jones, they also featured that balance. Even Matt Castle, you know, people forget McDaniels was the OC for Matt Castle in 2008, and they had a great offense that season as well. So McDaniels just has so much knowledge, so much lineage in New England, so much understanding of the way the Patriots won, so much understanding of how to play football within this division, how to play football in the elements of Gillette. You know, that marriage between the toughness of the defense, the toughness of the team of Mike Vrabel and what he wants to provide, the running game of McDaniels, the play action element, right? This is going to be a power football team. You add on some Drake May athleticism and some of the things uniquely that he can feature in his offense. And I'm very, very excited. So he'll obviously need a little bit of evolution, maybe a little bit more motion, things like that, maybe some RPOs elements in there as well, which has never been a big part of Josh's offense. But I do feel like what he is at his core is a great coach and a great offensive coordinator, and I'm looking forward to him calling plays for the Patriots once again. So that is the first deal here, is Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels in New England. I'm really excited as a Pats fan. Let's move on to the next coach, Ben Johnson, who I think Bears fans should be extremely excited about. One of the leading candidates on the market this offseason, a guy that many saw as the next Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, the big ticket, right? The big ticket item in the coaching search because of his ability to call plays, his ability to be creative, his ability to kind of allow a resurgence from Jared Goff, right? Jared Goff has never been better than under Ben Johnson's leadership, play calling. And I think that this is the main reason they hired him in Chicago. They hired him for Caleb Williams. There's no doubt about it. Now, are there difficulties of understanding how Ben Johnson might mold his offense towards a Caleb Williams? Because when you watch the Lions, right, what they did so successfully was be an under center run team that featured a lot of play action and a quick passing attack from the gun. And Caleb is going to be interesting how, you know, he is able to morph into that type of player. Or does Ben Johnson take what Caleb did in college, take some of the things he did well in Chicago so far, and try to mold that and adapt that to his offense? So I think Ben is truly going to be tested for his ability to be versatile. Okay, so I think Ben is a great coach, though, and a great play caller. He's been at the forefront of running a very versatile run game. You know, they do so many things in the run game. They have a bigger bag of tricks than any team in the run game. So I think Chicago, a team that plays in the elements, plays in the weather, you know, they're also going to be a physical football team. This is not an offensive fancy hire. This is all about physicality. This is about playing with that style. You know, Ben got that from Dan Campbell. I think he's going to bring that to his culture in Chicago. I think Ben has questions to answer in terms of his ability to lead a group of men, in terms of his ability to be a head coach and not just a play caller, because he is a little bit more reserved, right? He is a little bit shy. It feels like he's not a big bravado, big character like Dan Campbell. I thought they were just the perfect marriage between the two, because it was the genius behind the scenes of the big character and the big bravado, right? That was kind of the combination of Campbell and Johnson. Now Ben is going to have to prove that he can handle everything on his plate, right? He's going to have to, like McDaniels. Like McDaniels was a great play caller, but he couldn't really make that adjustment to head coach. And I don't know if he ever had that personality. But then again, there's guys like Kyle Shanahan who have been able to do that. They've been able to make that adjustment. They've been able to go from brilliant whiz kid play caller to great head coach. Same as Sean McVay, right? Same as Matt LaFleur. So can Ben Johnson join that group and be closer to that group than he was an Adam Gase or a Josh McDaniels, right there? So he'll be in one of those buckets. To me, I think he'll be closer to this Sean McVay kind of style, because I just think he's going to get the offensive line right. He's going to get the physicality of the football team right. He's going to get Caleb right. And it really helps starting off with an extremely talented quarterback. If he can just fine-tune him a little bit against pressure, get the ball out quick, you know, just a little bit in terms of that accuracy and that deep ball, get Caleb going, that is going to get everything going in the right direction. And players and teams and fans are going to start to believe. And then you combine that with potentially a very good defensive coordinator hire in Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen was always at the top of the league in terms of defensive rankings with the Saints, with Sean Payton, right? And this Lions thing has always been built on the Saints structure, Sean Payton, Dennis Allen, right? And that toughness, Sean Payton, that chip on the shoulder of the Saints over all those years with Drew Brees, Dan Campbell, the guys in the front office, Aaron Glenn, these guys all came from New Orleans, right? So that has kind of transferred to Detroit. Ben Johnson's trying to bring that to Chicago. Dennis Allen knows that very well. He's very familiar. I think Dennis Allen will actually be a better play caller and provide a more versatile and creative scheme in terms of pressure than Matt Eberflus did in Chicago. And Eberflus was a very solid coach, but that's a defensive head coach. And Dennis Allen was a defensive head coach, but like Josh McDaniels, he's almost the flip. He's the defensive coordinator version, like very good play caller, very good at his side of the ball, but couldn't quite grasp the whole thing of being a head coach. So that's a great hire because he also has experience being a head coach. So he can help Ben Johnson out in those areas. He could be the head coach of his defense, and it can allow Ben Johnson to focus on his offense and really trying to do his job, which is evolving Caleb Williams, which is helping Caleb Williams reach his potential. That's ultimately what this hire was made to do and achieve. So I love it. I think that he'll be a great coach. There are questions, right? This is not like going to be 100%. There is somewhat of a deep floor here just because he's never proven it, never done it. He's not Mike Vrabel in terms of, we've seen Mike Vrabel, 91 players in 1 year. He's still the number one seed in the AFC. Right? People might question Mike Vrabel's ability to coach offense, but that's not what he's about, right? He's a 3-phase, full spectrum coach. Ben Johnson, he's going to be more in that offensive driven capacity. And he's all about some like what these other guys are about in this modern age, which is we're going to get the most out of the offense, but they do need help around them, especially on the defensive side of the football. So those are my thoughts on Vrabel and Ben Johnson. I thought the two best candidates in the entire offseason, the two best candidates that could have possibly been hired for totally different reasons, right? Vrabel for the personality and the leadership, and Ben Johnson for the creativity and the schematics, right? That's kind of my perspective. Now, a coach that's already proven it and been very good for a couple of years now is Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell did sign a contract extension, multi-year contract extension with the Minnesota Vikings. I think this was a good move by the Vikings. Clear and obvious. Like, nothing really has to be said other than it's a coach of the year candidate year in and year out. He's gotten the most out of the quarterbacks that he's been given, whether it be Cousins or it be Sam Darnold, who no one believed in. Now it's going to be JJ McCarthy. O'Connell, I think, is a brilliant situational play caller. I think he brings a very solid scheme to Minnesota, but he's also got a really strong culture behind him. And I thought that was showcased throughout this season. That Sam Darnold celebration, I don't remember which game it was. It might have been the Packers game after that Packers win, the late Packers win, where they were all losing it in his locker room and he was just watching everybody. Like, yeah, the season didn't end how they wanted in the first round against the Rams. It was kind of embarrassing, but he's been great and he's built something in Minnesota. And I think he really deserves to continue to build that. Now we'll see if Brian Flores will be a part of that, which, that's going to be interesting. Does Brian Flores leave? Does Brian Flores stay? We'll get to that a little bit later. All right. But there was another big hire, big hires everywhere, but another big hire in the NFL on the defensive side of the football, not Brian Flores, but a man that's been to the Super Bowl, coached the defense in the Super Bowl. That's big game Lou Anarumo, the former Bengals defensive coordinator who did get fired, unfortunately, from Cincinnati. And I think it was mostly due to the performance of the defense this year, which was absolutely unforgivable by a lot of fans. And it was just hard to overlook. That being said, I don't think it had much to do with the scheme. I've always been a fan of Big Lou. I think in the playoffs, he's always come through. I think one of the most underrated things about the Bengals' run in the playoffs in recent years has been their defensive performance against guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, to be specific. I feel like he's always put together good, creative, and smart game plans, and he's aided Joe Burrow to this playoff success, Zach Taylor to the playoff success. Now, I think it's a great hire for the Colts, personally, because I think he's a way better coach than Gus Bradley. Now, Gus Bradley had his time. Gus Bradley was great at one point in the NFL. Around that Seattle scheme days of the Legion of Boom, Gus Bradley was a great coach. His scheme was at the forefront. They were really running some fire stuff on defense. But Lou is I just love the defensive minds that are much more creative. They can come up with coverages or game plan tweaks from week to week that give them an advantage. Just something as specific as running more three-man rush against Patrick Mahomes in an AFC championship than any team has for an entire season, right? That is just something very small that Lou can bring. Is just that one little tweak to his defense on a given game or a given week that's so important in a playoff game. Just that ability to get one or two stops, one or two punts, one or two turnovers in the course of a big game. Now, that being said, on top of it, I think that, like I said, Gus just a little simple. He never really blitzed a lot. He was all about the four-man rush. He needed a certain personnel to run to be successful. He was very, everyone kind of knew what he was going to do. It was he's going to run a lot of cover three. He's going to run a lot of cover one. This is the stuff he's going to do, right? Lou is a lot more creative and a lot more modern in terms of there's a lot of two safety stuff going on in the NFL right now. Lou is going to bring the occasional blitz, So I feel like it's just an evolved thought of where the defense needs to go by Shane Steichen. And I thought this was a smart hire by whoever made the decision, but you would think Steichen would be involved in it as the head coach of the Colts. But I think it was a necessary step for the Colts to make a difference with their defense in 2025 and beyond. Now, when it comes to the Bengals, I do kind of feel like it was kind of a lame firing. That being said, it does appear that they have their eyes on a coach or two in their defensive coordinator search. Now, Al Golden out of Notre Dame is one to really keep a close eye on. Al Golden is the Notre Dame defensive coordinator, and he has also been a part of the Bengals in the past. He was the linebacker coach during the 2020 and 2021 seasons. So that season that they went to the Super Bowl, right, he was the linebacker coach in Cincinnati. He's also been a primary linebacker coach in Detroit from 2016 through 2019. And this guy has a ton of experience at the college level. He's seen a lot of different schemes, a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different head coaches, right? Virginia, he was there. Temple, he's been there. Boston College, he's been there. Penn State, Miami, and Notre Dame. So this guy has been everywhere. I mean, he has a lot of knowledge, a lot of probably college concepts and things that they're doing at that level that he can bring that would be fresh for the NFL, and that could potentially provide an edge for the Bengals defense in 2025. Now, I didn't think his performance against Georgia and that defense was particularly satisfying if you're a Bengals fan. It wasn't necessarily great, but I think getting Notre Dame to that level, getting Notre Dame to that game in general is impressive. Okay. And being a part of that staff that was able to achieve that is very impressive. So I'll have to give him the nod for that. Now, I don't know too much about his specifics of his defense because I haven't really followed him to that level. But I would say that this is the type of move that I'll always like give a thumbs up to, just in terms of like, this is outside the box. This feels like a move that, sure, he was in your building, you liked him, you know his personality. So there's a little bit of interworking there, but like, he just has so much of this experience that he can bring now. And he's been a defensive coordinator, a couple different stops, a couple different places. He's proven himself to be able to do this job very effectively. Now, can he do it at the NFL level? That's something that, like, you look at one of the best defensive coordinators this season. We saw it with the Los Angeles Chargers, like this guy, previously in Michigan. So those college hires can be successful. Todd Monken is a guy that, was at Georgia, was at the NFL, then Georgia, then Baltimore. All of a sudden, he has a 2-time back-to-back MVP, right? So these hires can work out. Now, that being said, some alternatives for this hire. Patrick Graham was interviewed, the Raiders defensive coordinator. Patrick Graham's been getting head coach interviews as well. I think Patrick Graham's a great coach of the Raiders. He's also a Patriot guy from a long time ago. He was there with the Patriots for many years during the dynasty as a positional coach. But he's a good defensive coordinator, in my opinion. With limited talent, he's able to make the most of it. Matt Eberflus runs a totally different scheme from Lou, so it would be interesting to see if they went that route, but he's also a very credible name and a good defensive coordinator, formerly with the Colts and, of course, the head coach of the Chicago Bears. They had a good defense, especially last year. DeMarcus Covington of New England would be outside the box. I wouldn't like this hire personally as a Patriots fan. Having watched his defense this season, I thought that our defense took a huge step back from what it was previously. Wink Martindale is another name to throw out there as well. He was at Michigan this year, previously with the Giants and the Ravens, has always been a very good defensive coordinator at the NFL level. He is very aggressive and blitz happy, though, so it would be a different style for the Bengals. But those are some names to really look out for, the biggest of which to be Al Golden, all right? They need some help from a player standpoint, though, as well. Now, with all those updates, guys, let's get to our updated coach landing spots for the teams that haven't already made a move. The coaching spot is still available to be had. All right. So let's begin. And Tia, let's just do the chat. Who will be the next head coach for the Raiders? All right. We'll get to that. Don't you worry about it. We'll get to that. We're actually going to get to that right now. Why not? That's a good transition, sir. We're going to get to that right now. Shout out to TD Davis in the chat, bro. And Truth also wants to know Raiders head coach. My pick for the Raiders head coach is none other than a man that I just mentioned. Todd Monken is going to be my choice for the head coach of the Raiders. Now, it does feel like they're interviewing a lot of defensive names, but it feels like they want an offensive coach. They were trying to get Ben Johnson. Like, they really were. I think they probably offered him a big sum. Now, that being said, Todd Monken would be a low-key, really good hire by any team that hires him. I really think so. Because unlike a lot of these guys that are getting hired nowadays, he has extensive experience. So he's not going to be a guy that's flustered by being a head coach, in my opinion. Sure, he's never been a head coach at the NFL level. He was a head coach at Southern Miss from 2013 to 2015. So he was a head coach in some way, shape, or form at the college level. But he's been a brilliant offensive coordinator for many years at many spots. And he is a great offensive mind that's taken Lamar Jackson's game from elite to MVP level, right? Like, has taken him from a good passer to a great passer, has like made Lamar legitimately, arguably, for seasons now, the best quarterback in football, right? So that is huge. But you look at his experience. He was the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay with a very pass-heavy approach from 2016 through 2018. If you look back at some of his offenses, they were some of the best at throwing the football in the NFL during those years, okay? You look at his experience as Cleveland's offensive coordinator in 2019 with Baker Mayfield and what they did there, okay? Then Georgia, which was extremely brilliant with their national championship runs. He was the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach from 2020 through 2022. And it wasn't exactly with like incredible quarterback talent either, but some great talent at wide receiver, tight end, of course. And obviously their defenses were well known. But he did some great stuff with Georgia too, especially in terms of the balance. And you kind of see him kind of evolve from more of like a pass heavy guy to he's been able to be a run heavy guy with Baltimore, being able to be a guy that, can be run heavy, pass heavy, play action heavy, all the different things, right? So Todd Monken, I think experienced, started in the NFL in 2007 through 2010, is a guy that I just think, unlike a lot of these guys, has a lot of experience, offensive coach, probably a little bit overlooked, but he's been one of the best play callers in football the last 2 seasons, and no one ever really seems to bring him up. Like, just look at what he's done for the Baltimore offense, going from Greg Roman to Todd Monken. It's been a huge difference, guys, like, especially in the passing game for them. It's been a massive jump. So if Brady's looking for somebody that is an offensive-minded guy, I think Todd could be the hire, especially if Brady does go to his connections in Tampa Bay. Todd was once there. Perhaps, they could maybe bring up what makes him an attractive option as a head coach. But yeah, I think this would be a good hire. Now, my backup with the Raiders would be Brian Flores, simply because his connections with Brady. Like, Brian Flores, to me, I think deserves a head coaching gig. Like, I think he is an excellent defensive coordinator, an excellent defensive play caller. I think he's one of the most creative, especially in terms of blitzing in football. He brings an aggression, both in terms of his mentality, his presence, and then also his defense. And I feel like he'd bring a physicality to the Raiders that is much needed. And he'd actually be a much better fit for the Raiders, in my opinion, than the Dolphins, like when he was with the Dolphins. But you even look at what he did with the Dolphins, and he turned them around rather quickly. He made them a winning football team in 2 seasons in a row. And he got a bad rap, in my opinion, because of the whole Tua thing and because of the ownership and because he didn't get along there. But, Flores has since grown and experienced being with the Steelers and being with the Vikings and being able to take a defense in Minnesota that was kind of crap, right? And turn it into, a really, really crazy good unit. So I think Brian Flores would be a good alternative as well if they wanted to go to a defensive-minded guy. And obviously the connection from New England with Tom Brady would make a lot of sense, in my opinion. Who's coaching the Jets or the Jags next year? I'm on the Jets, but we'll get to the Jags eventually, all right? Let's talk about another defensive mind that could land in New York. That is Aaron Glenn. My landing spot for Aaron Glenn is the Jets, Jets. Now, my backup would be Brian Flores here as well. I do think it's going to be a defensive-minded guy. I do think it's going to be somebody that can lead men. I do think it's going to be somebody that is fully capable of bringing a tough football team to the Jets. I think that was what was attractive about Robert Saleh's program, was their no-nonsense attitude, their ability to compete on a weekly basis. And despite their lack of success with Robert Saleh previously, I think that is something that they want to continue to have continuity with. Is they're not going to back down. They're going to be able to play physical football. They're going to be able to play in the cold, right? This is the Jets, after all, and they play in the AFC East against the Patriots, and they play the Bills. So they're going to have to compete with those football teams, right? And Aaron Glenn is a guy that comes from the Saints and the Lions tree, ultimately of Sean Payton and Dan Campbell. This guy's going to bring a chip on his shoulder. He's going to bring a bite the kneecaps attitude. He's a former player that can relate to other players. And he's a former very good player, by the way, as well. And he's going to be a guy that I think is going to bring an aggression, both in terms of how he leads, but also in terms of his defense. Like his defense, just like Flores, they're very get after you. And I think the Jets have always been influenced by Rex Ryan in this regard. All right. Like, I think Rex Ryan really influenced the Jets ownership because that's been the most successful period of the Jets in recent years has been Rex Ryan. I mean, ultimately, he was a very good coach for them. Like they went to back-to-back AFC championships in 2009 and 2010, I believe. And that has, I think, stuck with the Jets, their fan base and with their ownership. And they've tried it with guys like Todd Bowles and guys like Robert Saleh. But, Aaron Glenn and Brian Flores fall under this same thing where we're going to get after you. We're going to bring it to you. We're going to blitz. We're going to play man coverage. Like, we do not care. Like, in this same vein of Rex Ryan, that's Aaron Glenn. Like, that's exactly what he does in Detroit. Now, did his personnel fall off this season? Yes. And I think that really hurt him because one of the faults of Aaron Glenn, which is why he's kind of not my favorite hire, is because he hasn't shown an ability to adapt or be creative beyond what his approach is. And I like coaches that can adapt. I like coaches that can be versatile within their approach and go from week to week and game to game, right? But there's also a lot of value in knowing who you are and knowing who your identity is and knowing what your culture is and stamping that on your football team, right? Like that's what Dan Campbell has done with the Lions. Is like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to be. 4th and 15. Yeah, we're going to go for it. You know what I mean? Like we're going to fake punt. We're going to run the ball down your throat. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Like they say what they're going to do and they do it. And that to me is a leader. And that to me is exactly what a lot of teams are looking for. A lot of owners are looking for. A lot of owners are impressed by. I think what also gives him a lot of points, whether it be with the Saints or the Jets, is Drew Brees endorsed him. Drew Brees said, this is the guy that the Saints should hire. So, you don't think the Jets are looking at that? Like Drew Brees, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, said, this guy, you should hire this guy. And the Jets, might have the inside track on getting Aaron Glenn. So as the former player, I think he returns home and I think he leads the Jets into the future. All right, let's get to the next coaching landing spot. The Dallas Cowboys, probably the most confusing and unknown coach to team landing spot of any of them, just because I don't know what Jerry Jones is going to do. I don't think Jerry Jones even knows what he's going to eat tonight. I really don't. So I think Kellen Moore is going to be my guess, right? These are my predictions, guys. These aren't necessarily who I would hire, but these are my guesses. And we're going to get into why. It does appear that Brian Schottenheimer is hot and heavy in Dallas in terms of potentially having the inside track. But I don't think Brian Schottenheimer would necessarily go over well with the Dallas media. Like, I think they could sell Kellen Moore a lot easier. Brian Schottenheimer has never really been like an ace of an offensive coordinator. Kellen Moore has, right? Like, Kellen Moore has also been in Dallas. He was really highly thought of in Dallas as like a young whiz kid offensive coordinator, right? And they loved him in Dallas, and Dak loved him in Dallas. And then he left, and now what is he doing? Well, he's proving he can adapt with Philadelphia, and with one of the best offensive lines and running backs in football, have a historic season in Philadelphia and lead one of the most, explosive offenses in the league. So he's done that in Philly. And then also last year with the Chargers, it obviously didn't go well with Justin Herbert because he got hurt, but he's experienced coaching in LA with the Chargers now, Philadelphia with Nick Sirianni, and he's been in Dallas. So he's now experienced what it's like in other places. So I feel like that gives him more of an edge at this job, or at least more reasons why you would pick him as your head coach. He's a little bit more experienced and older as well. Like, he was very young. He is still very young. I think he's only like 35, right? Like, he started coaching in the NFL almost immediately when he like retired from playing as a quarterback. He was in Dallas from 2018 through 2022. And he was the offensive coordinator from 2019 through 2022. And they were top 6 in points 3 times during that stretch with Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, and CeeDee Lamb in that core. Okay. They were also first in yards in Dallas twice under Kellen Moore's play calling. So that is or play calling and offensive coordinator, whatever you want to label that. But yeah, Kellen Moore has been a good offensive coach and a guy that I think Jerry Jones likes, a guy that I think is not too big of a personality for Jerry. That could be a problem if a guy has too big of a personality, but a guy that Dak also really likes, and the future of this team resides in Dak Prescott. So there's just a lot of reasons there why you might go with somebody like Kellen Moore. And then you could probably still keep Schottenheimer around as well. So I don't really see why they would hire Schottenheimer, to be honest, right now. Maybe in a couple of years, but that's just my opinion. But that's my prediction, guys. Kellen Moore back to the Cowboys, but this time as the head coach, gaining a little bit more experience in Philadelphia and LA. Jed says that Kellen Moore is probably the hire. Crazy Killer says Jerry Jones wants a yes man as head coach. Yeah, a little bit. But Kellen Moore sort of, I don't know. I don't know if I should say this, but he kind of has that vibe. I don't know. I didn't say that. All right, let's move on to the next one. The Saints head coach. Well, this is an easy transition. The guy that used to coach the Dallas Cowboys. How about Mike McCarthy to the New Orleans Saints? And some Saints fans won't like this just because Mike McCarthy, for some reason, is like seen as a bad coach, but like he's not. Like he's won a Super Bowl. He's been to multiple NFC championships, probably like 3 or 4 off the top of my head. He's had like multiple 10 or even 12 winning seasons, like 12 wins with multiple quarterbacks too, by the way. And Mike McCarthy this year, like I thought he coached well, like considering he had Cooper Rush at quarterback and he didn't have half his defense for half the year. Like, I thought the guy actually didn't do a bad job at all, and in my opinion, like Mike McCarthy, the thing I like about him is he's got a ton of experience and he just knows how to build a winning team. Like, if you want to bring a floor to your franchise, Mike McCarthy is going to bring that. Like, that's exactly what he did to Dallas. Like, he took whatever they were doing before and made them stable, right? Like, they started winning 12 games a year. Every year. And then this year, Dak gets hurt and they don't do that, right? You need a quarterback to win some games. And I think the responsibility of Jerry and the front office of not putting talented players on his team and on his roster for Mike McCarthy really caught up to Mike McCarthy. Because I thought the Dallas Cowboys roster this past season was a lot weaker than it had been in previous years. But McCarthy's a good coach. Like, he has experience building programs, Packers, Dallas Cowboys. He could go to New Orleans and in a team that has a really bad cap situation, has a lot of older players. I think that he could be a stabilizing force within the program and within the team and within the structure. Now, maybe they want to go with like a younger name, like a Joe Brady or something that has ties to the Saints. But Mike McCarthy also has ties to the Saints way back in the day, like 2001 through like 2004, if I'm not mistaken. I think Mike McCarthy was there in New Orleans as an offensive coordinator. So he even does have really early ties to the New Orleans Saints. He's also experienced a lot of drama. He's had to deal with Jerry Jones. He's had to deal with Aaron Rodgers. He's had to deal with late career Brett Favre. He's had to deal with all these big spectacle items, right? And he's done it with like really, really good, like he's passed, okay? He's passed those experiences, right? And I think even when it comes to Derek Carr, he would be on the same page with Derek Carr in terms of what they're looking for in an offense. Like Carr saw some of his most success under John Gruden. McCarthy and Gruden are somewhat similar in terms of their West Coast background, in terms of their offense that they run. So I feel like Carr would probably, like Mike McCarthy quite a bit in terms of just if they want to keep that connection going, Carr in New Orleans or whatever. But he could also be a guy that could transition and build a younger quarterback because he has experience doing that as well. So I just think Mike McCarthy is honestly become so overhated that he's underrated. So that's why I have him going to the Saints. He's just a proven coach. Maybe they go with somebody that's a little bit more inexperienced and a little bit more of a flashy name that's on the market, right? There's guys like Cliff Kingsbury. There's guys like Joe Brady. There's guys like, Kellen Moore if he doesn't go to Dallas. There's other names out there, but I think that McCarthy could be a very, very good option. All right. The final landing spot, Jacksonville. Okay. Jacksonville's interesting. Robert Saleh has been interviewed multiple times, but personally, I don't think Robert Saleh is getting a job. I just don't understand why Robert Saleh, honestly, like, I don't understand why he would get a job based on his success with the Jets. Like, I don't know why. But as a defensive coordinator, I think he's a good coach. I think he'll end up in San Francisco, all right, with Kyle Shanahan. Now, the coach that I have going to Jacksonville is Liam Coen of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I've stuck with this one, okay? Liam Coen, to me, was one of my favorite coordinators to watch this season. I loved his offense this year. He made Tampa Bay so difficult to defend. It didn't really matter the personnel either, right? Like, they had guys in and out of the lineup, whether it be at wide receiver, tight end, or running back. This guy was still figuring it out. Like, Liam Coen, he brought an unbalanced Bucs offense that ranked 32nd in rush yards per attempt in 2022 and 2023 to a top 5 rushing offense in 2024. Okay. He took Baker Mayfield from a good quarterback to like easily a top 10 quarterback this year. Like, there's no debate. Baker Mayfield was easily in the top 10. He was a borderline MVP candidate, right? Liam Coen just evolved everything they were doing. He also has experience at the college level with Will Levis at Kentucky, right? He kind of got him drafted as high as he did. He's a Rams guy, you know, behind Sean McVay, and everyone knows that if Sean McVay even sneezes on you, you get a job in the NFL. So he's been a wide receiver guy, a quarterback guy, coaching-wise, and then an offensive coordinator as well with the Rams. So he has plenty of experience there around bright minds in the NFL. He was top 4 in yards, points, yards per attempt, second in time of possession, and top 3 in passing yards. Okay? So all of those numbers. And what does that provide? Well, that provides a very good offensive scheme for Trevor Lawrence. And Jacksonville paid Trevor Lawrence. They want Trevor Lawrence to be the guy. They want Trevor Lawrence to get all the conditioning commercials for his great hair, and Liam Coen can help them achieve that, right? Liam Coen, some of the things I thought he did really well with Baker are things that are very transferable to Trevor as well in terms of skill set. Play action, deep shots, intermediate passing. Lawrence is very good in that area. And also the quick game, where Trevor Lawrence was very good at Clemson. The quick screens, things like that. Cohen's offense fits Trevor very, very well. And they have some really nice pieces, like Brian Thomas could fit that Mike Evans role. Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby in the backfield could be Rashad White and could be Bucky Irving, right? They've got kind of a dynamic slot player in Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram, whichever they decide they want to go with. So they've got a lot of, I think, the pieces there already for Liam Coen to work with. So I think that would be an excellent hire. Like, I'd be pumped if I was a Jacksonville fan getting Liam Coen. I think he's a really smart guy. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say. Those are the landing spots for the NFL. I want to get to the chat. Because I think the chat has some things to say. If you guys want to ask me any questions, let me know in the chat. Or if you want to just have a comment, go ahead. What kind of staff can Coen assemble? I can't see the whole comment, but that's what I'm assuming you would say. I'm sure that he would. I'm not exactly sure, okay, who he would bring in on defense, but I'm sure that his ties to the Rams, his ties to the college level, and his ties to the Bucs. So I'm sure that there would be. I don't know who his top candidates. I haven't looked that far in terms of what Liam Coen would do, and I haven't really heard anything in terms of what Liam Coen would do and who he would bring with him. But think of those places, right? Like, think of the Rams, think of the Bucs, think of Kentucky and or that sort of level. Those would be some of the coaches I think he would bring with him. McCarthy to the Saints doesn't make sense to casuals. Yeah, I know. I know it's kind of boring, but I do think McCarthy deserves a job. Like, at the end of the day, he's definitely one of the best coaches in the NFL in terms of, like, he's one of the 32 best names to hire. He's probably a top half coach in the league. Like, he's been fired for reasons that, like, he hasn't been able to get Dallas over the top. right? And that's what they've been searching for and looking for. I think that goes beyond McCarthy, though, to be fair. So I don't know. I think that the Saints need a little stability. They've kind of lost it under Dennis Allen. BFP says, my Saints need Joe Brady or Anthony Weaver. I don't necessarily see Anthony Weaver as a hire, but Joe Brady, I think could definitely happen. Now, I would say about Joe Brady, I like his offense in Buffalo. But bro, I could call plays for Josh Allen. Like, we got to slow down a little bit. I could call plays. Hey, Josh, throw a laser on this play. Josh, run somebody over on this play. McKinney says Packers OC. I'm not sure who that's going to be. I haven't really looked into it, to be fair. I will say that the OC is Matt LaFleur. That's who the OC is. So I wouldn't really worry about that. That's who they're going with. Matt LaFleur. That's their OC. I think you guys are in good hands. I'm sure it could be one of his brothers, to be honest with you. Saints need a young coach. Sure. I think, I would just rather it be an offensive coach. One of the guys that I will say that I think should be very closely looked at is Cliff Kingsbury. I think Cliff Kingsbury needs to be investigated because I think a lot of people blamed him for what happened in Arizona, despite them getting the playoffs one of those years, by the way. And I think we need to look closer at Kyler and closer at Cliff. And what Cliff's done with Jaden Daniels and that offense with those weapons, I mean, come on. Cliff has done an amazing job. And he was really, really like a coveted guy, not long ago. So now he has more experience. He's a little bit older. He already has that head coaching experience. Like, I think Cliff is a really interesting name. I would have been really intrigued by Cliff in Chicago, to be honest with you. Monroe says McCarthy has had success in 4 different places. The Saints are included. Yeah, the Saints. He was an OC with the Saints. So, yeah, definitely. Where's Pete Carroll going? I think Pete Carroll will be a add-on, like he'll be a consultant. If I was Ben Johnson, I would want somebody like Pete Carroll backing me. If I was Liam Coen, I would want somebody like Pete Carroll backing me. Yeah, a younger coach. I wouldn't say Dallas. I think he'll be a consultant somewhere. Probably for the Raiders, like one of those, probably not Todd Monken. That's a bad example, but probably like a younger guy, like Liam Coen, like a Ben Johnson, like that type of guy that hasn't really had that experience before. That's why I do also like the Dennis Allen hire for Ben Johnson, because he's going to have a guy that's right beside him that has that experience. But I think bringing in a consultant for young coaches is like a must. Like, you need a guy in your building as an assistant head coach or as some sort of consultant that can help you on the day-to-day of being a head coach. Peterson as an OC anywhere. I could see him going back to Kansas City in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure, man. That's a good question. I haven't thought of it. But maybe for one of these teams that have to replace a coordinator, like, I don't know, Philly might be awkward, but if Kellen Moore does get hired, would they consider Doug Peterson? I don't know. The Bucs, would that be considered? Maybe if Liam Coen leaves. The Ravens might actually be pretty interesting because if Todd Monken leaves, but I don't necessarily see it on the surface. It's not something that I've really heard, to be honest. I think Doug Peterson, that's a tough one, man. I feel like he's been a good coach. Like, I've liked Doug Peterson. I just feel like it didn't quite go well this last run with Jacksonville. It feels like he's a little stale offensively and as a head coach. He's kind of had his moment, feels like. All right, guys, I think I'm going to end it there. It's been a long stream, but there was a lot to cover. Appreciate everybody tuning in live to BR NFL Daily. I'll be back one more time this week, so make sure to check it out. Back at 7 Eastern on Thursday. Thank you guys for watching. It's Mitch. Peace.